Well, welcome everyone. I am really excited for this event today. It is definitely a big topic of conversation. So as you are joining here, I know we've got people who are still rolling in at the top of the hour. Today we are talking about what the end of third-party cookies means for your digital strategy. My name is Natalie Jackson. I am the marketing director at emfluence and one of our resident email geeks. Dave Anderson is also with me. He is our director of search. And so, of course, we're bringing two different perspectives and two different opinions about what the end of third-party cookies means for our various arms of business. And I'm really excited to kind of kick things off today with Dave Anderson and really work through what this is going to mean for you now, what it's going to mean for you as you start planning for 2021, and what are some things that you should and shouldn't do ahead of this major change in digital marketing. So Dave, I'll let you say a couple minutes or a couple things as well to welcome.
All right, yeah, I'm excited to be here and talk about this. This has definitely been kind of slowly progressing in this direction for a while. Sorry, I'm trying to move slides and it's not working. I think I'm really excited to get going with this. We've been since 2020. We've kind of been on this path of Google made their big announcement. This is really the trigger of this conversation. For the most part, there's been some other things happening, but in 2020 they announced they're getting rid of they're going to stop supporting third-party cookies in Chrome within 2 years, which is coming up as we very quickly. We're already halfway through 2021 somehow, so we are definitely on path for this, and I think this is there are some impacts. I'm pretty excited overall about it. But there are, but as marketers, there's definitely things we need to think about and kind of start planning for.
And one thing that people who are joining may or may not know about us, I know we've got clients here, but we also have some people who may not be as familiar with us. Emfluence has both a digital marketing agency where we're already thinking through what the impact is to our clients with the end of third-party cookies. We also have our own marketing automation platform, the Emfluence marketing platform. So we're kind of looking at this from two different angles, both from the software side of things as well as from the agency side of things. So that's brought up some really interesting conversations internally. So yeah, as we move forward, I look forward to kind of hearing some perspectives here. So let's start by just getting a baseline understanding of what these different cookies mean. I know that some people kind of panic and say the end of all cookies, or is it just the end of third-party cookies, or even what's the difference between a first-party cookie and a third-party cookie? I'll admit this was newer to me as this came out. I had to really start thinking about the difference. I knew about cookies, but I didn't have a granular understanding of what each of those types was doing. So help us understand, just from a framework perspective, what each of these different things mean.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely been a topic of conversation for a lot of people, and anecdotally, I've heard it from others as well. Is when we talk about, if you go out and Google this topic, just put in third-party cookies or whatever, you're going to find a lot of content out there that's just saying it's the end of cookies as we know it. So I think there's definitely differentiators we need to talk about, and so this table kind of shows the general differences of them. So first-party cookies is really, this is cookies that you own on your own properties, and so it's actually doing things that maybe impact the functionality of your websites or are tracking behaviors within the confines of your own domain. And then the differentiator there is essentially like third-party cookies is as it sounds like, it's third-party pixels basically that are put on your site that are adding cookies to your browser, and they're tracking you not just your behavior on your own website, but across the entire activity that you have throughout the web. So it's really just a matter of how are we looking at this. So when you think about the life of a third-party cookie, this is kind of a simplified path. It's much more complex than this, but basically what happens is a user is coming to your site. So in my example, I use Lowe's because I've been doing a lot of like home repairs and stuff. So I'm getting a lot of Lowe's and Home Depot and all of that, kind of those ads hitting me in various spots. But so you go to a website or you go to their app or whatever the case may be, and this a pixel is essentially placed on your browser, on your phone, whatever it may be, and it fires off this cookie that essentially first it's collecting what you're looking at on the website that you're at or on the app or whatever, and it's really just it's monitoring that, and it's taking that user behavior, and then as you go on to other places throughout the web or throughout apps, whatever the case may be, it's monitoring that as well. And so this third-party cookie is really putting together a behavior, your browsing behavior, essentially, across the web, across various websites, platforms, and everything, in order to kind of help as marketers, it's helping us to create a better picture of, the relevancy of how we can target better ads towards you to improve conversions and to make it a more personalized web, which is also something we want to try to do as much as possible. These cookies can last for a long time. Sometimes it's up to a year. It may not be that long, but it can be up to a year or longer historically. But we think about first-party cookies in contrast. It's really just looking at your activity on that particular owned web property. So it's looking at you go to this website and what you do, and this first-party cookie is basically just looking at functionality of your website. So it could be storing login information, or we've all kind of graduated into this pretty hyper e-commerce online shopping mode. So it's saving shopping cart information for you. So even if you don't log in, it's keeping that cart full for you, at least for a short period of time, in order so that you can kind of complete your process. I've got carts all over the place and various hardware stores looking to make sure that I have get the best deal, because these products are pretty expensive these days. So I'm trying to make sure that I get things going the right way. And it's just storing your personal details on the browser for yourself, but it doesn't follow you beyond that website. It's just for that purpose. These typically are shorter term cookies, like 7 days up to maybe 45. And that's kind of the gist of third party versus first party. So when we think about it, the third party cookies going away, it's definitely a much more impactful thing for us to think about as marketers, and remarketing and all that kind of stuff.
And one of the questions we've gotten a lot for the influence marketing platform is, will this change in third-party cookies impact your ability to do things like website tracking or triggering emails off of website visits? And that, just so that everybody's on the same page, would fall under the category of first-party data as well. So would not be impacted by the change in third-party cookies.
Correct. Yep.
So keep website tracking all you like.
That's right.
So what's the driving force behind all of this, do you think? Can you help us understand why Google, who's obviously making a ton of money off of doing third-party remarketing, why would they want to take this away? Why would they want to put this into a category of things we shouldn't be doing?
There's a lot to unpack with that question. Google certainly has its motivations, and Google can kind of make the rules because they are the big guys. So, but the biggest reason for this movement is kind of a response to the push for consumer privacy. There's definitely over the last several years, specifically higher profile things have been happening that are designed around, we need to make sure we're protecting consumer data and making the web a more secure place for people to interact. There's definitely been high profile issues that have come up that have kind of driven this. So it's been kind of a slow march towards this kind of deprecation of third-party cookies. Just looking back the past decade, really, back in 2013, Firefox introduced the ability to disable third-party cookies, which was really kind of the start of this process. This was, back when programmatic and all that was kind of really young in the game, and it was just getting started. So Firefox introduced that, and then several years later, Apple kind of jumped in on the game with Safari specifically. They introduced their intelligent tracking prevention, which is basically designed. It's a way to block tracking cookies. And then in 2018, this was pretty big news for a long time, still is. GDPR came out and went into effect. Didn't necessarily directly impact us here in the States greatly, unless you're an international kind of company, but it definitely set in motion a lot of other things. And then Apple Safari browser can just continue to expand their blocking of third-party cookies as a default kind of mechanism also in 2018. And again, in 2018, Firefox stripped cookies and blocked storage from third-party tracking as well. 2019, both Apple and Firefox enhanced their blocking mechanisms to basically by default continue to block third-party cookies. So it's now the user would have to opt in to allowing third-party cookies to track their browser activity. And then in 2020, the Google came out with their announcement of the deprecation of third-party cookies support in 2022. Also, CCPA was introduced in California, and that started to set the stage for further kind of push for privacy here. And then in 2020 as well, CPRA, which is kind of the more enhanced version of CCPA, was approved by voters. So that's going to be further enhancement of what they're doing there with privacy, with consumer privacy. This year, just last month, really, Apple's iOS 14.5 really introduced basically eliminated the identifier for advertisers. So it's that's the one that's affecting apps, the app marketplace. Everybody has to opt in and say, yes, you can track our data and use our data for whatever your purposes are. It has to be full transparency with what's going on. And also this year, Brazil kind of jumped into and has their own version of GDPR that's going into effect, and may have gone into effect this month, actually. And then we're coming up on 2022, wherein Google plans to phase out their support of third-party cookies. So why is this such a big deal now? There's been a lot of steps that have gotten us to this point, and now with Google making their announcement, it's become a heavily discussed topic. And really the main reason for this is Google has 64% of the browser share. This is globally. It's slightly higher here in the States, but it's 64% globally. And when you consider also Safari and Firefox is another, it takes it up to about 90% of browser share across the web is now in this privacy mode of not supporting third-party cookies. So it's a pretty big jump coming up, and that's going to be the most impactful significance that we see. In various surveys, the perceived impact of the deprecation is going to be significant from a marketer's perspective. As much as 70% believe that this is going to be an even greater impact than CCPA and GDPR have had. So that's a pretty significant statement. Those are like laws that have gone into effect and regulations, and whereas this is a browser stepping in and making a change that's going to significantly impact it. So with the 85% expecting this to have a major impact on their advertising efforts, this is definitely kind of a large step to take forward. Because as marketers, we have been leaning pretty heavily on third-party data over the years to do the heavy lifting with our marketing efforts. We've been leaning on remarketing and targeting within Facebook ads and all that kind of stuff to really drive the relevance of our ads to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck from a marketing perspective, from an advertising perspective. So we've been getting really great results with that. And so, but as we talk through this, the reliance on third-party cookies has been increasing. over even through 2020. We've been seeing more and more usage of it, and we've also been seeing more investment in third-party data from a like just an overall perspective. So there's been more money going into acquiring this third-party data that we know is at some point in the near future going to become a more restricted kind of level of access for us.
Yeah, and I would be I'd be willing to bet that almost everyone on this call has at least one point used third-party cookies to run some sort of advertising campaign, myself included. So when you think about the different ways that we are using it, whether you're B2B or B2C, I think for B2B, it can often be a really hard task to get in front of the right audience, and that was a great way for us to do it, to layer third-party cookies into, say, an SEO plan, so that when you have a big purchase in mind, you're consistently showing your brand in front of a person who's visited your site. So it's definitely something that I think, regardless if you're B2B or B2C, how you're running your marketing and advertising strategy right now is about to significantly change. We've already been talking about that, even just for how we do things for influence.
Right.
So I think the biggest question that we could probably answer for everyone today, and just again, if you joined late, as an encouragement, if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the Q&A or to put it in the chat, and we'd be happy to answer it live. But the biggest question is how can we as marketers prepare for this disruption? I think there's a lot of things that sound really scary, and the impact looks really scary, but I think there are some real opportunities. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that marketers can do ahead of time.
Yeah, so I think kind of just kick this off. Erica, our paid media strategist here, one of our paid media strategists, had a great comment that the walled gardens, those are going to be the policy making folks like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter. They're going to be okay. They get to set the standards essentially. So, but there's other smaller niche ad networks. They're going to take the hit. They're going to have to be the ones that adjust to the policies that are being created by these big walled gardens that are going to be, impactful for an overall marketing perspective.
So Google's not going to lose the money. They're Correct. Just going to shift how you spend it.
Exactly.
Great. So talking about what we can do now to prepare, one of the things that is important to me as an email marketer, email is where my heart is. I do our full strategy, but email is kind of my heart. And so one of the things that it gets me excited about being an email geek is that we're coming off of what was essentially email's best year ever in 2020, where lots of other channels went away due to the pandemic. And suddenly lots of marketers suddenly wanted email. They wanted to do email again, right? I think it's the first year that I never heard anyone say email is dead. And that was really great. But I think that this is we're looking at maybe what could be email's second best year ever, as you start to think about how email is first party data, and we can still leverage first party data. But the key is going to have to be, how are you going to acquire it? What's your email acquisition strategy? What's your first party data capture strategy look like? So I know you and I were talking a lot about how, for example, I invest a lot of money in SEO, and I get you to my website and I have a really big purchase ahead of you. It's an expensive thing. It's not something you're going to make on the spur of the moment. So you visit my website, you take a look, you get distracted, you bounce off my site. Maybe you plan on coming back later. As it stands now, I can remarket to you using a third-party cookie. And I can say, okay, well, I'll just keep that ad in front of Dave until he's ready to come back and maybe schedule some time to talk with us. What's going to change, though, is that I'm going to have to be thinking proactively about capturing you while you're still on my site before you bounce and get distracted. So I think one of the key things that is going to be a huge impact is leveraging things like light boxes and modals to do data capture when someone's on site. So if you're investing a ton of that money into SEO, making sure that you're capturing their email address while they're there, which of course then means that your email strategy has to have a really high value. Why is someone going to subscribe to your emails? It's not going to be so simple as to pop up a modal and say, hey, Dave, give me your email address. Like, no one's going to do that, right? So I think it's also a really good opportunity as we see both a need for more first-party data and an increased interest in sending email in light of the current pandemic situation. And I think even just people are realizing that email is a great channel. Some of us already knew that, the email geeks did, but I think it's really going to have to force marketers to reframe the value of their emails. No more batch and blast, no more sending a message because the sales team told you to. And you're going to have to think first about, okay, so if I'm going to pop up a modal that says, Dave, sign up for my emails, what's the value? And the value oftentimes is one of three things. You're going to offer something, whether it's a discount or a special or a welcome or a coupon. You're going to provide thought leadership in an industry or niche that otherwise might be difficult to find relevant information in. Or you're going to just simply say, hey, I'm providing you with updates on what we sell. Here's updates on our products and services. And you're going to subscribe because you want to know what those things are. So we have a couple of really good examples here, both B2B and B2C side. One, I think, is that, bread and butter of B2B marketing is the content download, right? Everybody's got to have that white paper or the infographic or whatever the case is, right? And those are great for layering in first-party data captures. I think right now, and Dave, you see a lot of this too, because there's a lot of promoted advertising running for content downloads. But like making sure that you're asking for the right kinds of data points when someone makes that download is really key. You'll see here, I've got the industry benchmarks for 7 key measurements. First name, last name, email address are great, but you may want to capture some other data points as well while you're there. Preferences would be a great one. So if you could ask somebody, hey, what are you interested in hearing about? Do you want to subscribe to our newsletters at the point of conversion? That's a great way to think through content downloads and getting those into a position where they're gathering some first-party data. But then I think too, Dave, that's something that you can take away and run ads to if you have that data for segmentation.
Correct. Yeah, you can take that. That's going to be really valuable information actually moving forward. So one of the important things about this is making sure you are collecting the information that's going to be most useful for you to create those kind of segmented lists. Because I think, from my perspective, those custom lists that you can load into Google and Facebook and Twitter and everybody else, you can load these into, and even your programmatic kind of advertising. That's going to give you great value in terms of continuing to keep visibility with those folks that are maybe early funnel or whatever the case may be, to make sure we're driving deeper conversion and deeper engagement.
And something else I like to share on this too, because if you've ever tried to run a content download campaign, you know that people will give you bogus email addresses just to get the content. And I think this is a really, and it's a really nuanced thing, but I think that this is where you definitely want to use landing pages, ideally from your marketing automation platform, because what you can do then is, rather than offering an in-browser download of your content where I can put in bogus@bogus.com and get your white paper, if you make it such that the price that I'm paying for this white paper is my valid email address, and say, hey, you can fill in your content or your contact information on a landing page, but we're going to send this PDF to you via email. It'll put in some confirmation that you're actually getting the right email address in the first place, instead of bogus@bogus.com. Another one that I really admire, and I think it's done really well, is Pact. This is more on the B2C side, and they kind of have that really standard B2C 10% off welcome offer. So the first time you come to their site, modal pops up, give us your email address, we'll send you 10% off. That's great, and that's pretty common, but I think it leads to a batch and blast mentality. Whereas what they do here, which I think is really, really smart, is as soon as you enter your email address, the modal flips to a second landing page where you have the option to tell a little bit more to personalize your email experience. I, for one, love this as an email marketer because it's going to help me segment them, and it's giving me data points like their birthday so that I know when to send them a birthday coupon. It'll tell me, hey, if I roll out some new bedding and bath, I need to tell this person for sure because that's what they want to hear about. But I mean, going back to the potential for targeted advertising on this alone, Dave, how many different potential segments do you see for running targeted ads?
Well, there's a lot there. There's at least 4, right? So you got a lot of different ways you can take this data and really make some customized things.
Right. So rather than just sending over an email list and saying like, blast everybody with an offer from Pact, you've got some real potential to segment and slice and dice this data and say, okay, well, this person's going to get targeted these ads, this person's going to get targeted another set of ads. So it's not just an email play. Segmentation, I think, is also important as we think about transitioning it through to paid media.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some other things as we move on? I think this is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and you and I kind of come at this a little bit differently. So one of the things that we hear a lot from people is, especially as they're talking about running marketing automation and automating some of that email strategy, is, you know, they want to do these really sophisticated things with email, and they want to layer in like multiple data points and create all kinds of automated triggers. And that's great, but I think as you start to think about first-party data captures, the first thing you're going to have to do is think about your tech stack. If you're running a landing page generator and an email service provider, and separately a social media account, and then separate from that, a survey account, it might be really difficult for you to aggregate all of that data into a single location to do much of anything on an automation perspective. This is a really great graphic that we built for a webinar series we did earlier this year with our friends at Email on Acid, that kind of talked about like, what's your level of sophistication and automation? Are you leveraging multiple data points to create dynamic, deeply personalized email content? Is at the far end of the funnel, and very few marketers are doing that right now. Partially because there are tech limitations, and partially because it takes a lot of data and it takes a lot of maneuvering to get that sort of thing right. And the reason that I wanted to bring this to you is that this is a good time to stop and think, hey, if there's something that I want to do with marketing automation, for example, if I want to run content download campaigns and use a landing page that automates an email for my marketing automation platform with the content downloaded, and then drop them into an automated nurture designed to get them to schedule an appointment with us, I need to ask myself right now if my tech stack can do that. And if I'm using an email service provider that only does email, the answer is probably no. So understanding what you want to do with your data and what that's going to look like is going to allow you to take a step back and ask if your tech stack can even accomplish that. You kind of take a slightly different, your approach to this is a broader view, and you see more of the tech stack than I do. So, I mean, how do you see this playing out? What should people be looking for as they evaluate their tech stack?
Yeah, I think I do look at it a little bit bigger picture, not necessarily this big, but this is, I do love this graphic, and I look at it every year and just like shake my head at how much it grows every year. But I think my perspective on this is you really got to make sure that you're looking at your ad stack, specifically your ad tech stack, making sure that you have the right partners in place that are going to be helping you to prepare for some of this stuff as you go. There's, as you can see, there's thousands of logos in here, and essentially, they all have their purpose in your, they could all have their purpose in your stack, but you need to pick the right ones. You need to pick the ones that are going to be, supporting you and being a partner in terms of, third-party tracking is going away. So what are we doing about it with our platform? From your programmatic vendor or whatever to, how the different various social platforms are leveraging it and all of that. So I think, definitely I'm looking at it in terms of how can we put together the best marketing stack that's going to help us to continue to better leverage first party data in a way that's going to help support what we're trying to do, but also it's also going to be kind of building upon and evolving over time as we see this kind of new normal with third party tracking no longer being a thing that's driving a majority of our efforts. So I think it's, those are the things that I'm looking at in terms of all of this. And it definitely is the same. It's kind of just one other side of the coin you're looking at. It's just a matter of how can we tap into all of this and make sure we're doing it well.
We have a question in the chat here, which is what are the best tips that you have for finding partners and marketing stack? Like what would you advise to someone? What should they be looking for with these changes coming up ahead?
That's a really good question, and the answer is probably going to evolve over time. But I think some of the things that I would be looking at are, if the vendor, say you're evaluating like a programmatic partner or whatever, do they have a perspective on this, and are they willing to share like how they're responding to the move, and definitely making sure that first party data is kind of a talking point that they're leveraging as well, is going to be important, I think. And also, just looking at, are they, there may be people out there that have, historically there have been people that have kind of tried to fake their way into a first party cookie when it's not really a first party. It's still kind of doing the same things. It's just like they're fingerprinting your activities in a different way, basically. So, making sure that you're also looking at, are they, using valid approaches, and not just to be compliant, but to also be kind of leading the way in terms of how marketing is going to evolve in this next stage of the game.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I think we have one more thing to think about now, sort of in preparation for the end of the year. Let's move on into that.
So this one's one of my nerdy favorites, is Google Analytics 4. It's a fairly big deal to me. I think it's a good evolution, and it's something that we all need to be aware of. I can speak with general confidence that this is the new wave of Google Analytics. It's the current version that most of us been using for like a decade probably is going to be deprecating over time. So GA4 is essentially a whole new build of Google Analytics. It's built with around a framework of machine learning and native cross-device tracking, which is always always kind of a headache, and well, not always, but it can be a headache if you're not like thinking through it all the way. And it comes with BigQuery linking, which has been historically only enterprise level folks can get that BigQuery linking, which is huge for if you're trying to build out like a data warehouse stack and getting all your data kind of centralized to a single spot. Google Analytics 4 also has that deeper integration with Google Ads, which a lot of us are very heavily involved in Google Ads, and so that's going to be a big deal in terms of how you can build out audiences that are going to cross over from your GA4 account to Google Ads and things like that. There are differences, so it's moving away from kind of channel perspective, really, and into more of a life cycle, looking at your the customer journey kind of reporting. And so it's definitely going to be a learning experience to get used to the new way of reporting. And it also definitely has like a more simplified way of tracking conversions. So that's great for some of us as well. But the caveat that I would put here, and I'll keep this short because I know I can nerd out about this, but it's new data, so there's not going to be the historical data porting over into your new GA4 account. So that's why we're recommending, like, let's start getting this set up and tracking data at least right now. It doesn't have to be a full setup where we've got all the different bells and whistles hooked up, but we need to start getting that data because that's going to be critical for that machine learning piece to start kicking in. What come early next year, when we're getting to the point of, hey, we need to start thinking about how we're connecting these and getting that going.
And we have another question too, which is how long before Google Analytics 3 is completely gone and this will be kind of a requirement?
There's not been any official word from Google, which they always are pretty good about kind of giving you that word of when they're going to stop supporting. They have said that all of their efforts for future enhancements are going to be only for GA4. So that's an indicator that it's coming at some point. Our recommendation right now is to kind of maintain both. So you still have all that historical data in GA3, or Universal Analytics as they call it. So you want to keep that going right now and start building the data in GA4 so that you can kind of have that history starting to build as you go. And then I don't have a great answer. I think probably it's still going to be supported for a few years. I don't think it's going to go away super fast, but I think the reality is that all future enhancements are going to only be in GA4.
Yeah, and I think we have one more question in the chat about this too, which is just basically, is there going to be any change to, say, your email service provider, your marketing automation platform with the Google Analytics tracking? Or is that a question that you know the answer to yet?
don't know that I know the answer to that. My suspicion is it's not going to be a significant impact to some of that. I think, as we continue to dig in further, we'll learn more about that. But I don't have a defined answer for that one right now.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds like a good one for a follow-up blog post. We can dig into that a little bit.
It does.
Yeah, and I know we've got a question about whether or not that's going to impact tracking, even in influence too. So that sounds like a good question for us to follow up on. All right, so I know that these are the things that we should be focusing on right now, but because it's always important to prioritize tasks when you have a lot going on in your marketing program, which many of us do. What are some opportunities that we might take a look at that aren't necessarily like, oh my gosh, drop everything and do this now, but that we might want to put into the roadmap for our marketing strategies ahead? I'll start with the first one. And I feel like I've kind of been a broken record on this of late, but I do think it's really important, especially with the changes that are happening. The number one thing I think you could do right now is sit down and map your customer journey. I like to say do this by campaign. Because it just kind of makes it a little bit easier, first of all, to manage, but also because your entry points and where someone enters the funnel will be vastly different depending on what campaign you're talking about. So my recommendation is use your CRM data if you have it and pick the campaign that's driving the highest amount of value to your sales team. Whatever is driving the most dollars is where you should start. Seems easy enough to pick. But think of it, for example, and I know we're not really back to trade shows in person yet, but you might say, I want to pick trade shows. And you would sit down and map with your sales team and your customer success team, what are every potential touch point along the way that someone who originally meets us at a trade show, what might they see? Where are they seeing ads? What are the ads saying? Where are we sending them emails? Where's the salesperson reaching out? When are they visiting the website? What content are they consuming? How are they closing the deal? And this is a really good opportunity for you to think about not just your content strategy and how that plays in to the conversion stack, but also where are you going to boost content? Where do you want to layer in email to support a sales message or to counteract something that might be happening in the sales funnel, or even just to get marketing, email addresses into the marketing funnel? So how are you acquiring marketing qualified leads? How are you ensuring that you're getting people to, kind of get into that funnel? And this is something too, I think that, one of the questions that we have today is how can B2B marketers specifically prepare for the end of third-party cookies? I think this is a great starting point. What's your perspective on B2B in particular?
On B2B, I think that that's the most critical, more critical for B2B to have this concept defined and laid out. I think as we want to target very specifically for B2B customer growth. So definitely I'm more emphasizing on this. I think I'm going to jump over and talk about this now. I think there's native conversions in social and also in search is available, but I think investing in this as a process for growing your first party data is going to be a huge opportunity for us moving forward. I think it's built in natively to just capture that data quickly. And so I think like within Facebook and LinkedIn, we have these native conversion ads that you can run that are basically, it's just going to go and it's going to grab the data if we have a great strategy in place. So it's I think these are going to be opportunities for us to further jump into collecting that and making your first party data more robust as we move forward and enabling you to from your perspective, like we were just talking about, it's going to enable you to kind of create that customer path forward, I think.
And I think, so a couple of comments on this, that I think are important for people to take away. One is that I think, especially in B2B, there's a heavy focus on driving sales qualified leads. But I think that what, if anything, you should be thinking about right now and planning for is, how am I driving marketing qualified leads? It's a lot harder to get someone to give you their email address and their contact information for a sale. It's much easier to get somebody to give you their email address on a content download, or sign up for newsletters, or attend a webinar. So what are you doing that's not necessarily going to drive a sales conversation today? There's a great analogy that I heard recently, and it was, if you surveyed people and said, are you buying a house in the next 2 weeks? That the list is quite small of people who are really actively buying a house right now. But if you surveyed people and said, how many of you are buying a house in the next year? The number of people who are planning to buy a house in the next year grows exponentially, which I think to us as marketers is important to keep in mind. If you plan on buying a house in the next year, I want your email address in my database so that I can appropriately target you for the next year with my logo, my name, my value offer, my content, so that you know who I am. And when you are actually that 2-week window ready to buy a house, you'll remember me. The other thing that when we first talked about native conversion on social media, the first thing that popped into my mind is going back to the tech stack. And if this is something that you want to put into place, ensuring that you have a way to get this data into your marketing platform or your email platform. And if your marketing platform or your email platform doesn't have a way to do that, you might not be in the right platform.
For sure. Yeah, definitely making sure that you have these data points connected is going to be one of the bigger pieces that you need to figure out. It's not always simple. So it's, we can typically figure it out, but it's not always just a plug and play type of situation. So, yeah, one of the things we talked about was, hey, you can set this up, but if you don't have it connected to your CRM or your marketing automation platform, it's just going into this abyss that you have to remember to go download that list. And if, as you get busy, as Natalie said, like, I'm not going to remember to go download that list. So definitely we need to make sure that you're connecting this data so that it's actually, the value is coming forward.
Yeah, and we actually have another question too, which is a great question for the email geeks out there. So other than encouraging data capture via email channel, is there any other indication of this new direction in marketing privacy? Is it going to alter the opt-in versus opt-out approach of emails themselves? In other words, do we foresee regulations also requiring an opt-in model and no longer just an opt-out unsubscribe? And that's what I'm happy to answer. I do have a perspective on that. And Dave, if you do, I'd love to hear it as well. I think that if there's any indication of what we're seeing with GDPR and CCPA, that we probably are moving toward, a consumer type law that'll say, hey, you really should require opt-in. And really, especially on the B2C side, you should require opt-in for all of your emails. Now, it gets a little bit trickier and stickier with B2B because I don't know that anybody would willingly opt into a sales nurture, and I think that there still is there still is a little bit of gray area, even with GDPR and CCPA right now, around what's the difference between a consumer inbox and a business inbox? And there is a difference. And so I think that, as you move forward, best practice is if you can get somebody to give you their email address willingly, you're going to be the better off for it. They're going to be more likely to engage. They'll be more likely to get excited when they see your name in their inbox. They're more willing to, engage with you in the long run, right? Like they're less likely to damage your deliverability by, kind of creating spam complaint issues, or it's a better scenario for everyone if you have explicit permission. And then I say that with a big asterisk because no one's ever opted into a sales nurture on the B2B side. So I think ultimately make sure your email has value, make sure it's something that people want to receive, and you'll probably be okay, at least for the foreseeable future. Dave, I don't know if you have a perspective on that you want to share too.
I think I'll defer to your expertise on that one. I do think in general, I agree. I think we're probably moving in that direction, but beyond, the rest of those details, I'll defer to you.
And there's no reason you can't run email subscription as a social media ad. If you really want to get people from social into your email channel, I mean, I will tell you, at least in the last year, I've probably converted on an email offer more than I have on anything else. So, I mean, if you're running a social ad, especially if it's like a, you know, an acquisition campaign, I've seen so many stuff in the last year that I didn't even know I needed, and probably didn't really need, but I was like, yeah, I might need this. And maybe I didn't want to buy it right now, but I was willing to give up my email address because I knew that that would be in front of me more routinely than a social ad. I go blind to the social ads, but I'll always look at my inbox.
Yeah.
We have another question. So for small businesses who don't have the most current email providers or CRMs, and go that route with email, where can we go to explore providers that can get us to a better email opt-in setup? I mean, I think really just providing a reason why somebody is going to subscribe to your emails should work for pretty much any email service provider or marketing automation platform. When you acquire an email address, even if it's like as simple as, and I've seen this at some of the shops here in Kansas City, where like they literally have a clipboard that's like, do you want to sign up for our emails? And like you can write down your email address. I mean, that's opt-in consent. It's a lot of work, but it's opt-in consent. So I think just being proactive about making sure that you are putting a subscription place clear front and center where your customers are, clearly defining the value of what you're going to send to them if they do subscribe, and making it easy for them to give you that email address wherever that happens. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be sophisticated. It could be as simple as a clipboard. It's not my recommendation, but if that's what you need to do, it works well. Yeah. So what else?
So up next, we have re-emphasizing on contextual targeting. This is definitely, you know, it's I won't call it old school, but it's definitely a kind of a more traditional method in digital marketing is contextual. I think that we're going to see a resurgence of that, honestly. So I think essentially that's just looking at your patterns and basically retargeting to you. So keyword hero here is the example of the person that's retargeting me based on my search history, which is obviously very nerdy SEO and analytics stuff. So I was reading this article, and keyword hero has been following me for a while. So they keep giving me these ads. But I think it's, you know, contextual is definitely going to be probably a bigger component of how we're going to move forward with things. And I'll jump into some of that in a second. Now, so Google's privacy sandbox is kind of one of those. I don't know. We call it an opportunity, but it's really like this is the reality. This is what's coming. So the biggest piece of that right now that's kind of further along than some of the other pieces is this flock concept, which is the federated learning of cohorts. It's essentially it's kind of taking a different path towards building out clusters of people that have very similar behaviors on the web. So it's not individualizing your personal behavior, but it's putting you into a group, kind of like, you know, it's kind of just building these groups of people that are searching in various ways or whatever the case may be, and then using that. It's going to use that as a method of kind of remarketing or retargeting your ads based on those different cohorts that they create. So you could end up in a lot of different cohorts. This is actually actively out there in the market being tested now with a small percentage of Chrome users. So there's definitely that's definitely going to be a future reality. If you go out and look up Flock, you're going to see it's a very controversial thing, but this is kind of the direction Google's going. In my mind, it's very similar to kind of how you know, maybe 2 years ago or whatever, how Facebook was building out targeting as well. It's kind of like putting you into these clusters of people, and issues that came up with that were like unintentional opportunities for discrimination and things like that. So it's got some potential in terms of how marketers can use it, but it also has there's some things that consumer advocates are really, really strongly pushing back against in terms of, you know, is this really like the best path forward? So I think that That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to go further than that. But there's other things that are in this Google Privacy Sandbox. So there's really kind of 5 key pillars. I'm not going to talk about all of them in great detail, but the turtle dove is the other one that's going to be fairly prominent in terms of targeting and remarketing. So I think that's going to be one that we'll see more of and down the road. There's not a whole lot more detail around on that one out there. A lot of it's focused around Flock. But there's also going to be like trust tokens, which are kind of like a CAPTCHA, Google's version of CAPTCHA, and fenced frames are another thing that's going to, it's designed around privacy. I think it's categorized as like privacy budget or something like that within the privacy sandbox, but basically it's going to limit the amount of private data that you can capture that from an advertiser. So that's I would say from my final 2 cents on this is I'm definitely not like a guru expert on this. I encourage everybody to try to learn as much as you can on the privacy sandbox and what they're doing there. There's a lot of interaction with the community, with the advertising community on this. So they're trying to Google's trying to work with others in the advertising industry there to get a more, a better version of how Flock and all this will work out in the long run.
That's a lot. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So what are some things that we can avoid? And this next slide is probably my favorite.
Don't panic. That's my big takeaway from this. Yes, it's definitely going to impact how we're doing things. If you start acting quickly and kind of planning for this, it's going to be fine. I will say in early tests of Flock, which I should have said just a second ago, but in early tests they're showing that it's got great kind of efficiency that's not 100% comparable with third-party data, but it's got some good efficiency, like 90 to 95% efficiency comparatively in terms of like conversion data and performance metrics. So they're, from that perspective as an advertiser, there's not going to be, if that continues, there's not going to be massive impact, but don't panic because there are options. There's definitely ways that we can kind of shift strategies and make sure that we're doing the right things to still be effective and efficient with the dollars, but also get the results that we are close to. Hopefully we still get the results that we've been getting.
The next slide is kind of my soapbox here. One of the things that I think is going to happen a lot is that there's going to be even more pressure for especially B2B companies to buy lists. Because I think it's going to be one of those situations where, all we need is email data. Why don't we just go buy some lists of email data? And I want to say that, this makes me cringe, but it also makes Dave cringe. From an email perspective, this is going to be, and every once in a while they'll say like, but these people are triple opted in. Well, that's not really true. They can't triple opt into something that they don't know about. So they can't triple opt into your brand if you haven't bought that list, right? So it's one of those things where not only is it a bad practice from a deliverability standpoint, a lot of times it's a great way to find yourself in deliverability hot water. It's also got a pretty low engagement rate. It's not a list of people who know anything about you, and email is not a great channel for sending things if people don't know who you are. That's not what email is for. Email is for building relationships. So I think just even from the email side of things, it's a not great way to do email at all. Not only that, a lot of email service providers and marketing automation platforms will blatantly not let you send to purchase list. You have to have some record of how you acquired this person, and it cannot be through purchasing. And some platforms will kick you off if they find out that you are doing purchase lists. But that's just the email soapbox. Dave, it's not great from a list building strategy on paid media either.
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, we have certainly over the years, I've definitely have tried this over and over. And basically, from a email list perspective, part of the requirement of that being an effective strategy within paid media efforts is getting a good match rate. If you don't get a high enough match rate, you're not going to be able to use that list. And typically, we never hit that. We never hit that threshold. So it's definitely like purchasing the list, especially like this, is definitely a path that I would always guide against. There are certain use cases of second party data, but typically that's going to be more of an ingrained partnership, that you're not just going out to some random schmo that spammed you an email about this great list that they have. You're going to actually have some kind of working partnership probably with these people, and using so second party data is essentially their first party data. So it's really, it's really clean data that you can use in a way, as long as there's an agreement in place. And so, that would be my soapbox on that.
I think the biggest thing I could say is that if somebody asks you to buy a list, say, let's invest that money elsewhere.
Yes.
All right. And then the last thing is just really, and we've talked a lot about this, just not waiting until the last minute. I think particularly for me, with the importance of email, whether it is that you really need to take a hard look at your database now and say, well, how many emails do I actually have? And do I need a lot more to do the things that I want to do with paid media strategy? And if the answer is yes, I mean, you have opportunities. You've got direct mail. You could run acquisition campaigns through direct mail. And I know that sounds crazy, but you can use things like personalized URLs to drive subscription via email through a direct mail visit. You can use it through social. You can use it with lead captures on your site. And I think just making sure that you have different ways for people to convert on your site, and not just having SQL, sales qualified lead captures, but making sure you have marketing qualified lead captures too. Dave, what are some of your last takeaways? I know we've got at least one question and we're coming up on time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sentence pretty much covers my thoughts on it. Like, don't wait until the last minute. I kind of covered it with like GA4. Definitely don't wait on that. If you can avoid it. I think, as you said, starting to focus in on your first party data is going to be a big deal. And so, and it can be time. It can take some time to get through that and make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row there. So, work on that and make sure you're, maybe turn your emphasis from SQL based media campaigns to more MQL, and just kind of getting that list built, so you can use it in other ways in the future, that are going to be kind of more empowering for your long-term growth.
Yeah, well, a couple questions. The first one, what is our opinion on making the unsubscribe journey more difficult or easier? I will go ahead and jump in and answer that. If somebody wants off your list, you should let them. And you should not make it too difficult. Not to say that you should do one-click unsubscribes, because some companies have in place bot traffic or bot clickers that click on everything ahead of time to make sure that there isn't anything dangerous or harmful in the email. And it's a security feature. And if you have a one-click unsubscribe, guess what? Everyone who has that just got unsubscribed. But I mean, having a way to have both public groups and private groups so that I can control what groups I belong to, I can control if I want to opt out of certain communications. That's something that's been really big lately, where instead of having people unsubscribe from everything, you can say, hey, we realize this is a sensitive time for some people. Do you want to unsubscribe for Mother's Day emails? And you can have that as an option, and allowing people to sort of pick and choose what they want to be subscribed to versus, having a single capture. And this kind of goes back to segmentation. So my theory is don't make it a one-click unsubscribe, but definitely give people options, and don't make it hard. I've had some where they want me to log into an account I did not know I had to unsubscribe from emails that I don't want. And that's a surefire way to get yourself a spam complaint. So there's another one here that is definitely more directed toward you, Dave. Can you speak to how the recent iOS privacy update has affected reporting and conversion tracking for clients? And are organizations having to significantly change their KPIs because of this update?
I can't speak in great detail yet. It's still fairly new. So reports that I've seen have definitely indicated, specifically iOS traffic is, performance data coming from that iOS traffic is definitely been impacted. But it's still, relatively new in the evolution of this. And I think you should anticipate that that's going to be true moving forward. I think also this is another area where, not to harp on it, but GA4 can kind of help kind of backfill some of that data, just because it's got the native like machine learning type information. You can do a little bit more with that. But I think overall, yeah, there's definitely going to be a perceived decrease in at least in iOS, just because of how drastically they've shifted gears in terms of the privacy mechanisms. And even first party cookie data is 1 day max on iOS now. So if you got users that aren't going back to your site daily, then you're kind of losing out on connecting all that data together. So that's kind of the depth of my response at this point. But I think that's another one that's, hey, well, we're going to circle back on that in a few months and kind of give a deeper evaluation of that.
Excellent. Well, we're right at the top of the hour. If anyone has any questions, I know we've got a last slide here. Feel free to email us directly at expert@emfluence.com with your questions, or reach out to Dave or myself on LinkedIn. Visit us on the website, pop your question in our contact us form, however you see fit. We are here to answer your questions, and we would love to chat. Dave and I could probably fill another hour just chatting about marketing and best practices, and we won't do that to you, but do feel free to reach out if you have any questions. We'll send out the recording as soon as we get it rendered and posted. And otherwise, thank you all so much for coming today. Really appreciate your attendance, and have a great long weekend.